Yes. You and me, right? Yes, I am. Do you want to do this one? No. You said to only unmute that one. Just toward the bottom. I think you said turn volume off. Yeah, because this one is.
Well, like hit the volume.
I turned the volume on here. I did, I turned it off. Then we got it. Sure. Okay. That mic shouldn't be on. It should be only unmute that.
Yeah, is that?
So then, oh. There we go.
Better? You got that?
Find out. Not feedback.
Easier when we set everything up and tested it.
Yes, sorry, we
People
had
upstairs,
to
you know.
dash and get some new
We don't
microphones.
they don't have a tester. Working. What's up?
Oh, Nancy, I'm sorry. That's so loud. Let's see where they
A little bit under the weather.
Yes.
So Nancy, we'll let you go ahead and start. I know we talked a little bit after the session last week.
Yes.
Talked about some options or whatever, but I'll let you kind of guide what you want to start talking about. Where do we want to begin?
Yes, you did. You got in touch with us with me on Friday, after the Wednesday session, and said that you wanted to find some middle ground on these two issues that we had discussed last Wednesday. And I was very excited. I was very happy that it wasn't just dead in the water and that there was some more conversation. So I was very pleased that the district did reach out for that purpose.
Okay.
So it's really up to you where you want to start, if you want to talk about the salary issue first or the evaluation issue first.
So as we kind of talked on Friday a little bit, we definitely heard, the conversation that was happening, I believe, last Wednesday. And so we do have a counter for the Article 31. Yes, I was going to say that, and then I stopped myself right there. 31 with the evaluations, but tied to that, of course, we are all in agreement that we really are wanting to talk about salaries as well. So we do have.
Let's start with salaries.
So let's start with salaries first. And so we had mentioned on Friday about, I know we had lengthy conversation tonight. I don't think either one of us are ready. We had enough conversation last week, and we kind of talked about that, about what we can do, what we can't do. But we do know that we have 3 1/4 that we are ready to present as a bucket to PCTA. And you had asked for some information, followed up with salaries and what would that look like and so forth. So we shared that with you, I believe, today. Oh my gosh, even today it's blending together from the last week. So we did provide that information to you. And we would like to proceed with that. And then if, and I don't know if there's anything else that I needed to say to that. Or if we had any, if you had specific questions moving forward with that.
Well, right, yes, we did. Yeah. We did ask for the breakdown of how many people were annual and how many people were grandfathered at this time, because it has made a jump from last year. And exactly, and then how many, broken down, how many of those were half of the annuals were highly effective, how many were effective, and how many were needs improvement. I believe there were none who were unsatisfactory.
Right, there were none.
So, so that breakdown helped us to come up with some different scales. Because in looking at the proposed grandfather scale with, for the grandfather instructional scale with the 3.25 offer, actually there is nobody on that scale that gets 3.25. The top percentage there looks like it's 3.24,
Right.
and that is for 12 years, and then it goes all the way down to 2.23 in the 36th year. So it's obviously that would be a big problem, that it's they're not getting, that no one in that group is getting 3.25.
And I think that's something too that a couple things I'll follow up, sorry, just follow up with you. Is it is, for the last several years, anyway, I can't speak for more than 5 years ago because that's when I came on board. And it always has been that average, and where, depending on where you are on the scale, it's always been fluctuating between that. And it hasn't been a straight across the board. It's always been a fluctuation, but yes, pointed that out. I also wanted to point out that just for the people, and I hope you share I don't know if you share the information or not, but when we asked about the percentage of, or not the percentage, but the number of people that were highly effective, and developing needs improvement, there are only 18 employees that are less than effective on this current evaluation. So
it's 12.
well, it's 12 for performance, 6 on the grandfathered. So I just compiled. So just to give people an idea as we talk about this out there, that they just have that information. Nothing other than just information sharing. I'm not making a point or anything, just clarifying.
And those are NIUs.
Those are developing or needs improvement.
Okay.
Remember, developing is for any teacher in their first 3 years.
Yes.
And it turns to needs improvement. It's just the same category. Yeah.
So then we talked about negotiating a longevity supplement, so that the grandfather, or mostly grandfather, it would affect grandfathered people, would be in the realm of what the raise is supposed to be. Is the highly effective, their average, their percentages, thank you, Nancy, try to use your words. Their percentages range from 2.98 to 4.24. Also with the most veteran teacher, most experienced teacher having the lowest percentage. Same thing with effective, theirs would be 3.25 all the way to 2.29. And that is where the problems with compression come in.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Which in all honesty, and looking over so many other districts' longevity supplements that they have had since 2013 or 14, that has alleviated the compression problem quite a bit. Either way, whether you're on the grandfathered or on highly effective, I mean, on the annual, because it throws money towards years, a certain amount towards years, lower. in the beginning, 12 to 15 or 12 to 20, whatever, and more up at the top to stop the compression.
And that's really what we had done over the last several years. We would always say, here's a pot of money. This is how much money you have, and you, as a union, decide how you want to distribute them on the salary. And you would just only have to share less money.
Right.
The difficulty with that, of course, now is the statute.
Right, except for last year where we had to put a certain amount in the, in the beginning years, and we did.
But it's not just the beginning, it's the beginning years as well as, whatever the highest number is on the grandfather schedule, performance is 125% of that. That really causes the difficulty on the suppression issue.
Right, which is why we need a longevity supplement more than ever. But not just to take care of the compression, it now has to take care of balancing out what people receive, whether they are, whichever way they fall, if they have extra years. So that is what we're looking at. What you had suggested was, because I had said that there was the scuttlebutt in the Republican corridor, is that they were not happy with what this actually turned out to be and how it was playing out across the state, and that they were not happy about repeating it. So your offer was that if the rule gets, goes away for in this upcoming legislative session, which we would know by June, and then July 1st, you said then you would be willing to open up again, the bargaining again, and give something more to teachers, the veteran teachers who had not.
I don't have any copies, but that's what the second page of that is what we kind of talked about on the phone. And that is that trying to find a way to get, recognizing we have a disagreement and taking into account your comment that your information was that people were looking to repeal this language that says, if the statutory formula for compensating instructional personnel under the statute is repealed during the 21-22 legislative session, salaries will immediately be reopened to consider an additional salary enhancement for veteran teachers on the grandfathered salary schedule. And I think, Kevin, you may want to, the box that you have that has the green on it, where the 1495 is for grandfather, there's a way to spread that out differently.
Nancy, what used to happen in the past, and it's still going to drive that effective, but you would decide to put, you would decide to put like more money at the top end of the schedule and less money at the bottom. You still can do that. You still can take this pot of money and say, okay, I want to give 20-year teachers, say 1,600 or 1,500, pick a number, and then I'm going to give somebody who's on the lower end of the scale only like 700 or 800 or 900. I mean, those are just fictional numbers. You could play with that, but just bear in mind that whatever the number is on the grandfather schedule, the top end, that then becomes the number upon which the 125% is applied. So if you go to 1,600, then that performance schedule gets even worse. It has to go up even higher. So you have to be cautious of how high you go. But there is a way to look at the salary schedule and say, okay, I'm going to give the teachers on, say, years 10 through 15 1,000. You have 15, these are just fictional numbers, 15 through 20, and then give them 1,200, and then the veteran teachers, I'm going to give them 1,400, whatever the number turns out to be. As long as you're working within these numbers, that would work. But again, it's whatever that number happens to be, the performance highly effective is still going to be 125% of whatever it is. So there's a possibility to mitigate the effects of the compression.
Yeah, you would just be evening out most likely, right? I think.
Right.
Well, you avoid the issue, you avoid the need to do that when you just focus on the salary, the supplements themselves. We, our work on this over the last couple of days hasn't really changed any of your other numbers. Your other, any other parts of your proposal. I mean, I just went in and plugged them into some of the tools that we were using and to meet, to make sure that everything met the statutory definition. It's just my own, advocation, I guess, and education, and it worked fine. But I was, like you said, I was a little cautious about making changes because once you bump it up in one category, then if under the statute, you have to bump it up in
Yeah,
another category.
exactly.
Which is the great thing about the supplements is they're independent of that. And so they're a way to ease that, to continue to ease compression, to honor the service of our most veteran teachers. And also not to complicate the statutory implications of changing the base grandfather or the base grandfather salary increase.
So I'm not the attorney in the group, but I still think there's some question as to whether that's really violating the statute or not by getting a supplement.
Well, we would posit, I think that we would say just because I think it bears saying is that the law itself circumvents the Constitution. But it
It's
is
still a
law,
law,
it's
okay.
enacted, but it does not preclude longevity supplements. Those are in place across the state. They're increasing in numbers now, of course, because of the position that legislators put us in. And I think that's what our counter offer would be to the discussion we're having Friday is putting in place the salary supplements. And then if somehow it could really go either way. One, it's somehow found to be against statute, and that would not just be here, but it would be across the state. Or two, the law itself is completely repealed in session, and then we have the ability to come back to the table. But our proposal would be to put this in place and then wait for there to be a potential statutory challenge. We're presuming a statutory challenge that doesn't have to, that either experience or the straight language of the statute doesn't put us in that boat. So there's no reason to treat it as though what we're doing is against statute and has to be made legal, when in fact it is legal. And the question would remain whether somehow there was some sort of challenge to it, which can come because it's Florida, but it's not, but we don't need to, if what we're doing is legal, then we don't need to plan for it to be, against statute.
Right, and that, I mean, because it does exist, and like I said, had we negotiated a longevity supplement a couple of years ago, just to try to deal with the compression issues, it would be in place. We just never did, and actually, I'm sorry, I never thought of it, because it does really help with the compression issues, and then I know Mike was working very hard to move things around, and this longevity supplement may have eased some of that problem. So that, and then it would already be in place, just like it is in, when I spoke to you on Friday, I'd only heard 50 people. And then for the remainder of the day, I got maybe 13 people altogether. And people are, still ringing in. People are all busy and crazy across the state. I'm still getting in people who've already had it in place, and 2 so far that are currently negotiating one. Seminole County, I think, was one of them. I can't remember the other one, that are currently negotiating.
Yeah,
longevity.
it wasn't one, sorry.
That, right, because they didn't have one already in place, just like us. I mean, as far as the idea of, and I don't mean to be snippy, because I am very hopeful, and it's not snippy toward you, but snippy toward our legislature.
And we recognize that it's beyond the control of anybody.
Right.
Get it.
I mean, just because that is the scuttlebutt, and it is, and it's quite prevalent. But if we were to base decisions on promises made by politicians, we would all need to really have we need to be checked. Something's not right up here. So that's what, I mean, they do a lot of promising and a lot of talking, and then what they do before session and what they say before session and what they do in session are usually very different things, especially if there's pressure from colleagues to do a certain thing that they may not have liked, and they have verbally told everyone and their brother that they didn't like it. It doesn't mean that it's, I'm hoping that they're going to do the right thing, because so many of them thought it was, I think they got a lot of pushback afterwards from the public in general, not just teachers. So it could be, but I can't see making an agreement based on that. I mean, they're politicians. So I had brought it up at the last meeting because I was just trying to share that even they see how unfair it is. That doesn't mean they're gonna repeal it if they are pushed to keep it. Depends on politics, which shouldn't be part of education, and we all know that. So that's why we were just thinking, as Lindsay said, is if we just negotiate a longevity supplement, it is separate. We did put it in one of the sheets so that you could see how it would affect things. And
Do we have something?
Yeah, I don't
that
think
we're
we
looking
give
at?
them.
did you give
They're
her
copies.
copies?
Val?
So the first page, thank you. You don't know how useful that really is. The first page is really where the changes are. The other pages are just a sort of an extrapolation of what y'all proposed last week for comparison purposes. And I'll walk you through a little bit about the way that it's set up, just for readability. You'll see that the cover page is labeled PCTA proposed grandfathered instructional staff salary schedule. It is page 2, which was the PCSB proposed schedule, so that's on page 2. But what you'll see is that on each of the scales, or each of the schedules, whether it's grandfathered, highly effective, below effective, in each of those, we've added the number of employees and then the total cost of the increase by total increase, which is the second to last column in each schedule, by the number of employees. That sets up our proposal on the first page, which is everything else staying the same, but you have bands of longevity supplements anywhere from 250 to 1,250, depending on the year. So years 12 through 15, because we know that there are, and I'll get into the little mini chart on the right in just a moment, but we know that 12 years of experience was the least for that was at the end of the grandfather scale, will not go back any further than that. And so we started that at 250 for years 12 through 15, 500 from 16 to 19, 750 from 20 to 24, 1,000 from 25 to 29, and 1,250 from 30 to 36. With one exception, you're generally going to have more teachers with the lowest supplement, with one exception. There are, and please keep in mind that my numbers on the side are a little rough because they were dated September 1st. And they were just our numbers for the entire unit in terms of years of experience. I don't think that, because the list preceded me, I don't think that it broke it down according to how many employees were on the grandfather scale versus the performance scale within those years of experience. We expect this to be, for that number to be, broken down between the two scales. But you'll also notice that we have 1,008 teachers in years 16 through 20 versus 744 in years 12 through 15. Every other level goes down pretty significantly. And then, of course, with it, a slightly decreasing cost. And again, it goes by band. And so you'll see the total increase that was proposed, and then just adding in, and then the percentage increase is calculated on the side. Because of compression, it's not totally linear in the total percent increase. Our goal was to get this as significant an increase percentage-wise as possible. That's not completely linear because of compression, as it is linear in every other schedule. You go from the total highest percentage, or the highest percentage total increase at the top, or I'm sorry, at the beginning of the scale, and by the top of the scale, it's the least percentage, of course, and that I think that's a natural progression. Obviously, because of compression, this changes a little and it goes in bands. But this would be our proposal, our starting proposal for longevity supplements. And then again, on the side, you'll see total number of employees first multiplied by the total cost of the longevity supplement at that level, and then the total cost of the increase, incorporating the district's proposal for the increase and also the referendum. Keeping in mind that those numbers, I don't know that I would necessarily hang my hat on those numbers because it was the beginning of September. And I don't know if it was broken down by group, but that's what we have.
So can I ask a few questions?
Sure.
So the box on the right, it says total number of employees, total cost of longevity supplement, total cost of increase. The $2.1 million is the cost of the purple column, right?
Yes,
The $7.4 million is the cost of 3.25% that we're proposing, is that correct?
yes. Well, it actually includes both. It includes the cost of the supplement with the stated increase. So it's not that it's not 2.1 plus 7.5.
So it's just 7.5.
Exactly, that 7.5 includes the 2.1.
The second page
Yes,
is, what is that? The cost of the grandfather salary schedule increase.
yes, and that's just the number of employees that we exchanged, and thank you, Paula, for sending that this morning. I'm sorry for any lack of clarity on that, what we needed. Thank you for following up on that.
Sure.
So you got 2,481 employees up on this scale multiplied by the total increase, but this total increase is just taken from the materials that y'all presented last week.
So this is not part of or in addition to the first page.
No, it's not. I just, the last 4 pages, say last 4, everything but the front page was just the materials or the proposal that you presented last week. It sort of extrapolated by level. So that not only could we have a detailed and productive discussion about it, but we could also present it to members, showing them exactly what this would mean for them individually. But the front page, the one with the purple, is the only one that's been changed that we've added to. So this was your proposal is the last 4 pages, and then the purple page is our counter proposal regarding the salary supplement or longevity supplement.
So.
Which is a salary supplement, yeah.
Yeah, salary supplement.
So we will calculate roughly a $4 million increase on the grandfather schedule based upon the spreadsheet that I did. And you're showing a $7.4 million including the salary supplement on the longevity supplement. That's an increase of roughly $4 million.
3.4
$3 million.
3.4 million.
So maybe I'm not sure if I understood your question.
So if I looked at my green spreadsheet here,
Yes,
and that shows the $1,495 increase on the grandfather schedule.
Right here, this
Total
was
cost
the
of
Mhm.
$3.9 million.
Right, this
But
is what they
you're
anticipated.
showing a total cost of 7.5 million roughly. So that's
with the salaries, yes, with the salary supplement,
That's a $3.5 million increase in what we offer.
and again, like I said, the numbers that I used to calculate that were the ones that we had at the very beginning of September. I'm not
So
totally.
So
just
give or
trying-
take 100,000, you're right.
I'm just trying to
We're
understand.
Confirming
So
it is
this
additional.
proposal
Is it more money?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes,
$3.5 million more.
well, yeah, somewhere in that range, 2.1 to 3, I guess 3.5. My numbers look a little bit different, but again, I'm working on older numbers. So, but yes, it is a significant increase from the proposal last week.
That's probably, yeah.
Right, so you're saying here, the total cost of the longevity supplement would be 2.1. But that was with numbers that you don't think
That
are
I'm not
accurate.
100% sure
Right.
about.
Mm.
Yeah, and largely because I don't know how they're broken down. Like that number included both, I believe it included both grandfather and performance scale.
Yeah,
And so that could be slightly different. That could skew this a little bit.
Okay,
I mean, it could skew it significantly actually because of the number of that are on the performance scale. But this was what, using the rough numbers that I had from the beginning of September by the proposal, this is what it yielded, not just in the cost of it. You can see that the cost of the longevity supplement and then the total cost of the increase on this scale.
So are you proposing that the longevity supplement goes to folks on both the grandfather and the performance schedule?
No.
Our proposal would be that it is specific to, what makes it as equitable as possible. The way that we saw it in terms of equity was that adding it to the grandfather scale made it a lot closer to the proposed, to even like the highly effective scale. Because right now, there's about a $300, let's see, roughly, maybe 375, increase from the grandfather scale to the highly effective scale. For most of our, for at least the first couple of bands, that brings them roughly comparable. As you move up the scale, of course, you've got additional compression, so there could be points where it's a little higher on one scale versus a little higher on the other scale. But our intention was to have it to specifically to even out the equity, or to increase the equity between the grandfather scale and the other proposals.
So not that I'm a proponent or an advocate or an opponent of the statute, doesn't that very nature of what you're proposing violate the statute?
It doesn't. The statute, our argument is, and I don't even think this, it's not something isolated. I mean, this is pretty widely understood. The Constitution guarantees the right for public employees for the right to collectively bargain. Any kind of statute, if it totally prohibits the right to collectively bargain on salaries, is by nature unconstitutional. The idea here was
Has that been
that
challenged, you know?
the
Has
Constitution,
that statute been challenged?
this statute, I don't know. I don't know if
I'm
it's been
asking
raised.
for a second.
Well, I do know that the 80-20 split last year was there was some talk of some challenge in the beginning, but because they did allow for summer, and again, I would argue, I mean, my own personal opinion is that by giving the pittance of 20% to everyone but the starting, but to everyone but raising the starting salary was in itself circumventing the Constitution, but it did, at least for last year, stand as a way to, or allowing for some collective bargaining. The law is designed to do that here. It prescribes the way that it must be distributed, but because the legislature does not override the Constitution, there has to be room in the statute for direct collective bargaining at the local level. This is what's happened in counties across the state. It's happening now. Just as we described last week, it's happening in our closest comps. So like our regional comps, Manatee, Hernando, Polk, Hillsborough, I believe is doing it. I'm not totally sure because they just started out in instructional bargaining. You think I would know that one, but I don't. But I don't happen to, even though I was on the bargaining team a few months ago. I don't know if that's part of their proposal. But I believe Pasco is also negotiating that, though it's not in place yet. Now, some of these longevity supplements have been in place for years, and then some of them are being negotiated now.
Right, Manatee's, I know, is the closest that's been around since 2013.
At least since
And she was the very first person to answer me, Pat down in Manatee. And she was the one, I think, that's just in two groups.
So we have
instead of-
also been doing some checking, and you gave us some districts, and again, we hear from some and not from others, and actually our superintendent has reached out and made some calls as well. We're getting, the answer from Polk is no, they're not doing that. Sarasota was another one I think you had mentioned, or somebody had mentioned. It's been a talk, right? They're not. So again, I would like to just, again, we've been trying to do our due diligence too of finding that information out. Once we could converse on that and have some discussions on that.
All I could give you is the contract language that specifically delineates it. Like Polk, for
Correct.
example, is part of their salary. The longevity supplement is actually part of their salary. I believe that their salary supplement is like incorporated by reference. I'm not sure it's in the actual contract,
Mhm.
but unless they negotiated away from it this year, which seems strange given the history of it, they do have. I mean, I can send you the contract language.
Sure.
So what we know, though, is just
Yeah.
what the superintendent has told us based
Yeah.
on his conversations. And I guess our issue is calling the salary adjustment a longevity supplement does not change the fact that it is an adjustment and that violates the contract. And until that statute is challenged, it's a valid statute. Until the statute is, I misspoke, I said contract, but until the statute is challenged, it's valid. And you're asking us to ask our board to violate this.
No,
You
of
can
course.
take a different opinion and say that calling it something else, but you call it, if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And this is an adjustment. And that's exactly what the statute was intended to do. So
We can certainly argue over the intent of the statute, and I definitely don't think that's something that it's not gonna come out, none of us are gonna come out smelling like a rose if we talk about the intent of the statute. But the statute would also be designed and must be designed to comport with the Constitution. So just like last year, where they set aside a portion of away from their intent, set aside a portion of that GF allocation for general bargaining, that's exactly what this allows us to do. And there's nothing in the statute that prevents a longevity. I mean, if you have information different from mine, then I would welcome you to present it. But my understanding is there is nothing in the statute, in my review of the statute, there's nothing there to say that you cannot add to your supplement schedule that is already in place. We have extensive supplements for all kinds of functions in our district. This would be no different. And if you think back to the legislative intent, so we were mentioning Manatee, I think 2013-14. It was at that time that the move was away from tenure, from progression based on years of experience, and more towards years of effective experience. So adding that that performance component to it. We see longevity supplements that were added at that time to account for that, and also to value those veteran teachers who would be remaining, again, because that was challenged by that statute was challenged, remaining on the grandfathered scale. This is no different from that, and that's been practiced widely across the state. So I would argue that if you put this in place and there was a challenge to this practice, it would not apply just here, but across the state, then certainly we would never be asking the board to do anything against the statute. But we do ask them to use the tools that are available within the statute to value their most veteran teachers.
And I just want to point out too, that before Kevin, I think you have I'm sorry to interrupt you, but something we have been doing, obviously it's been for the last 6 or 7 years, is we have continued to add a level to each one of our salary onto the salary schedule. Those of you that have been around as long as I have, remember it was always 29 plus. Yes, remember that, the salary schedule that we had, and you stopped right there. But we have, for those that are 30, 31, 32, 33, I've asked to get numbers on how many of our employees are at that level. But again, it could stop at 29 at 64, but we have continued to increase that, to 73. So if my eyes are reading right, sorry. This evening. So I just wanted to also point that out, that when we start talking about that. So that did start about 6 or 7 years ago. Kevin.
So I don't think I'm following on your point about the statutory challenge. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? I'm not
Sure.
understanding.
Well,
You
I
said,
guess
let me
we're
kind of
we're
repeat what
looking
you
at
said.
this, we're looking at the situation, I think, from 2 different perspectives. Understanding the fact that whether we agree with the intent or not, whether we agree with the constitutionality or not, it is currently an enacted statute. And so we're not asking for that statute to be violated. We are asking that the district would work within the parameters of the statute to value the veteran teachers. And the
So
way to do that
that's
is
why they
salary
become
supplement.
confused.
Sorry?
That's why they become confused. You're saying you acknowledge the fact that it's a valid statute in place.
Yes, and the valid statute in place does not prohibit longevity. Is what is the lowdown.
I'll make sure I understand.
Right.
Now, is it possible that the
But then you
justice
want to
system?
say that it becomes statutorily challenged.
Yes, so for example, I should say that if there was a challenge to the practice, to the enactment of longevity supplements, which have been in place for, I don't even think that 2013-14 was the first one we saw. That it has been a way to value veterans for a number of years. But if there were to be a challenge to that within the judicial system, and it was found that violated all the way up through the system, and it was found that this somehow violated the statute and that the statute was constitutional, then because it's salary, we return to the table on it every single year. Certainly, if we found that there was a legitimate challenge to this and it was completely adjudicated to the highest level, then certainly we wouldn't ask for this to be in place for next year, because
And every county would have to get rid of
Every
them.
county would have
They would
to,
all
yeah.
have to get rid of their
But anyone
longevity.
that existed prior to that statute is a different issue. So the
It
statute
could
came
be.
into being last July, and if there were supplements that pre-existed, then whether those remain effective is up to the other districts. But what we know is many of the districts are saying, no, we're not doing that. We're not going to enact a supplement, calling it something different. But let me ask you a question. Is this proposal, does it assume that this is recurring?
So our,
Whether you call it a bonus supplement or what have you,
Yeah,
are you
definitely
proposing that
bonus.
this is recurring?
yes, the proposal would be that it is recurring. However, if there was a challenge to it and it was adjudicated that it was that it violated the statute and that the statute was constitutional, then certainly we wouldn't expect it to continue because we would not ask that something illegal be done.
So the issue that I have with that is by definition, a bonus, a longevity bonus is non-recurring.
This is definitely, you'll find that you'll never hear me propose a bonus.
Well, whether you call it a supplement or a bonus, it's based on longevity. And if you look under the FRS statute, it would be non-recurring because a longevity bonus, a longevity supplement, it's called under the FRS statute, is a bonus. And bonuses by definition are non-recurring. So would this be an annual adjustment? Is that what you're proposing?
I think, Lori, I'm sorry, I have to review the FRS in terms of the classification. Salary and supplements are treated differently from bonuses, even with regarding FRS.
It's by definition. It's under the definition of bonus is a
Okay.
longevity supplement. And by definition,
that.
that's non-recurring. It's under 121. I have to pull the exact statute, but
Thanks. I apologize. I'm gonna have to use my phone because I'm not getting internet connection.
yeah, I don't think we do in this
You
room.
want to get phone connection. I actually have it.
Yeah. I usually walk out of here and 7,000 texts pop in the parking lot.
I have no idea what the issue is.
Is that in your office too, Paula?
Yeah, it's
No,
just this room.
darn.
It's so weird. She's like right next door.
And this is supposed to be the room we use during hurricanes.
That's
why.
Yeah, if you, I did a search for longevity here.
Yeah.
Maybe it's my computer, 'cause,
I even tried to use my own hotspot.
I don't know.
Here, oops, oops, oops.
Not to hold y'all up, but it would have to be something that I have to review. I see where I could probably find,
Yeah.
find the answer, but I'm gonna have to search through it.
The payment is
Here you go.
bonus, maybe the bonus.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks. I do see that some bonuses, and some, like, for example, like payout of sick leave, things like that, I mean, at first glance, can't be included, but but because it's a salary, because it's considered salary, I don't know that this would be excluded. I do
So
see certain
it's under
things that would be excluded.
121.021, 121.021.47.
Okay.
It says bonus means, and it includes longevity payments. So if it's not a bonus and it's recurring, that would mean it's part of salary, which would mean that it violates the statute, which talks about salary adjustments.
Sorry, I'm going through it right now.
Lee County did it.
They just put one in. I know that Seminole's Seminole proposed it last week and the district was accepting it. They just hadn't worked out the numbers.
So they were.
That
able
was
to-
Seminole County that is doing it this year.
They were able to meet the requirements for FRS eligibility for their longevity thing. From the minutes.
Well, I can just read the statute and I can read the definition of bonus, and it includes longevity payments and they're non-recurring. So if it's not a bonus, then it's part of salary. And if it's part of salary and it's an adjustment, then it falls under the statute. So it puts us into this sort of circuitous discussion, and we can argue over it, but the statute is valid until challenged. And that's why we proposed the language that we did. We came up with after we spoke last week.
Maybe
And
we
thought
should
that-
be in contact with the people who are making it work, because
And we
well-
did, our superintendent has been involved in this process, and he has been calling.
So he
So-
did speak to Seminole County and Lee County, who are
Well,
initiating.
you
it this
just
year.
told me Seminole and Lee right now, so I didn't have those two on the list for last
To
week.
see if that is, because I know Seminole, I think, started it last week.
And we have in their minutes that they met
Yeah.
the requirements for the MRS.
So,
So this is really me.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to review it, because I mean, I've negotiated a number of salary supplements, and my understanding has, I know that they're taxed differently from bonuses. My understanding has also been that the way that, and I think maybe there were times that we called them on special payments, whatever it was, but my understanding was that they could count towards retirement. I mean, there's different ways that you could, I guess, call them different things. My understanding was that they could count towards retirement and that they wouldn't be taxed as a bonus. So I generally, my experience has always been to try to stay away from bonuses just because of the tax implications of it. It's just, you don't take away all that much after all is said and done. So, not wanting to take everybody's time to walk through this, I think I can't say that I totally understand what you're, and I am going to that statute number, but I'm wading through pages and pages of definitions, so I'll probably have to come back on it. But like I said, not only does this on its face not comprise it's not adding it to the scale, it is, and I know that all of it is, we come together to negotiate it every year, but we do have existing supplements that continue from year to year to year. There's additional money put to that for potential increases to it, but we would not be doing anything here in Pinellas that's not happening. And again, I'm generally not of the persuasion to say, well, if they can get away with it, why shouldn't we? We're not trying to do anything like that. In fact, our position that we're taking is that the law itself is getting away with trying to get around the Constitution. But again, it's been passed, and I'm not a court of law, but this is not precluded from the law that was passed. Now, if it ends up being challenged later, that's one thing. But there's nothing stopping us from putting something in place that meets the requirements of the law and then addressing it if there happened to be a successful legal challenge against it, because it would not just be affecting us here in Pinellas, it would be across the state. And that list of counties across the state is growing day by day as we move through the bargaining season.
And I do look, because it did come up to about FEA, whether they were going to challenge this. And what the governance board decided, voted on, was that we would try to work with the politicians to make it go away rather than challenge them in court. Because if we challenged in court, it wouldn't happen in time anyway.
Yeah, it's a bully
And
pulpit.
it would have been like a lot, yes, it would just be, as we know, it takes so long, and because this happened in June and bargaining started in July, technically, for us and for many, and certainly in the fall, they would still be in court and back and forth, and there'd be no resolution. So they were dealing more with, that's how they've been in touch with many Republican legislators, and many of them were saying that they didn't like this, which is why they were saying they very well could not show up in next year's salary allocation. But the bottom line is that is not a guarantee, of course, but it was the smarter way to go about it, rather than be all caught up in court while all the counties are trying to negotiate. And so we had voted to try to do this the nice way, instead of this automatically going to court. Let's just try to work this out, because it is unconstitutional. It is up to the districts and the unions to be negotiating and making these kinds of decisions.
Another way of looking at it is, and it might actually come into play here, because I know that this is significantly more than the district was proposing, but there's nothing that prevents ESSER funds from being used. And we know that not only do we have an influx of ESSER funds under obviously ESSER 1, but bond 2.
So let me
3.
address those. And ESSER funds, as I mentioned last week, those are non-recurring sources of funding, and I would never advocate for committing those to raises. It's a mistake. It's a way to create a financial problem down the road if you commit any level of ESSER fund, because the question is, if you mentioned before that this is a recurring supplement, we'll call it, $3.5 to $4 million, comes out of ESSER funds. ESSER funds go away in 2 years, and And so how do we pay it that next year? And it's not just $3.5 million, it's $3.5 million each of the next 3 years, right? So if we went with this supplement this year, and another supplement next year, and another on top of that, so now you're talking roughly $10.5 million that we'll have to find to be able to pay for this once those ESSER funds go away.
Sure.
Wait, why would it be 3 years?
Well, I'm assuming you're gonna come back and ask for the same supplement again next year. And let's just say
It may not be necessary if if there's no rules in the salary
Let's
allocation.
just assume it's not. Let's say it's $3.5 million. It's still $3.5 million.
I mean, if we're right back to bargaining normally, and they may still ask for, I would imagine what they really want is, what they're looking at is the opening. The starting salary, the beginning teachers, that they may throw a rule in there about,
But
that
again,
they have to have a certain
ESSER funds
percentage
are-
to make
again,
sure that front salary keeps going.
notwithstanding what the dollar amount is, ESSER funds are non-recurring source of revenue.
Right, no, I'm not talking, I don't believe that the ESSER fund should go to raises. But the rest of ESSER funds are going to be used when released to counterbalance other things where your money is being laid out. ESSER balance is replenishing where it can. It doesn't go directly to raises, but it frees up other money when for example, whatever it frees up from the insurance costs
Which are like-
wouldn't be the full 9 million, but it'll be something. There's money that's in the pot that could be moved around.
Those are likewise non-recurring.
And but I mean, I think we could, Kevin, I think you probably would agree that in the state of Florida, even the general fund is to a certain extent non-recurring. Because you have these sort of politically driven changes to the control that we have.
I disagree with that. I mean, I can fairly well predict what my general fund funding is going to be next year with fluctuations, of course. I
Yeah,
know
and
my
from year to
base
year, you could have some
student
pretty
allocation will be
significant
relatively the same.
fluctuations. Or
My
you
base
can,
student allocation is going to be relatively the same year to year. There's some years that we had a 47% increase, which is swallowed. There are years that we had decreases in that funding source, but it's still a relatively stable funding source. Not necessarily non-recurring. The legislature, and if they ever do, and I will use the word never, I never use the word never. The legislature will never come back and say to us, you don't have any money for any funding next year at all. Therefore, it's a recurring source of funding. It may not be as robust from year to year as it is, and that's why we have to make adjustments to our budget plans year after year.
Sure.
But those budgets are planned for and anticipated. If you're using, it's just like the concept of using fund balance. If I use fund balance for raises, my fund balance is only gonna last me a certain period of time. At some point, that's gonna run dry, and then I can't afford to pay those raises anymore. And also at some point, I'm gonna have to start laying people off. I don't have a reduction in force because I don't have the money to sustain that. So the general operating fund, while it's not necessarily as stable as I'd like it to be, it's relatively stable and it is a recurring source of funding. ESSER is a guaranteed source of funding that's gonna go away.
that was specifically with this in statute and by guidance designated for a number of infusions to local school districts, including teacher salaries. And I think if you're talking about,
So it's the sustainability of teacher salary, not the increase, not a raise.
Well, actually, I think in that section, it was not only sustainability, but they were expecting more teachers to be hired in order to deal with the learning loss.
That's a
And they
true
would
statement.
anticipate that you might need more teachers, so that is what they were talking
So
about
think
as
about
well.
that. Think about the concept of that. The whole point of ESSER funding was to mitigate what we refer to as the COVID slide, right? These kids really lost learning losses over those years. And so presumably this influx of money of somewhere around $200 or $300 million is to mitigate the impact of that, right? To bring our students back up to where they belong. And it's also presumed by the very nature of the fact that the money goes away, that that's going to be successful. And so therefore, those additional
And then you wouldn't
resources
need
that have to be added will no longer be needed. So that obviates the fact that it's a non-recurring source of money and that you should be using it for those purposes. And it's not necessarily wise to use that for something that's going to be ongoing in the long term. A salary increase is going to be a long-term recurring source of expenditure. And committing to my point is committing something that's a recurring source of expenditure with non-recurring funding is an unwise thing to do.
I understand I understand the position you're taking about it in terms of the wisdom of it. I would suggest that the wisdom is keeping, when we're addressing the stated COVID slide, keeping your most experienced, most effective teachers in the classroom, when that classroom environment and just their general work conditions are degenerating. as the days go by, weeks go by, months go by. And I know all of us wish that this year, thought last year might have been better than the previous year, and then it turns out it wasn't. And we thought, well, maybe there's hope for 21, 22, and it turns out it's even worse. And we're dealing with even fewer individuals in the classroom. We've got these big, we talk about, when we talk about course reductions, we have at least 100 vacancies in the district, and there's questions as to whether that can be higher at any given time. When we talk about preventing COVID slide, which is the stated purpose of those funds, there's nothing that's going to do that more than keeping experienced, dedicated teachers in the classroom. And there aren't any more experienced, dedicated teachers than the ones that are at the top of this scale, who have dealt with, by the way, and I know that y'all don't disagree with this, but I think it's worth stating, who have dealt with arguably the worst conditions in regardless of any other factor.
Because they went through the recession,
Yes.
which was rough, and we all had to make, tighten our belt, and we all had to make sacrifices. And they stuck it out and stayed. And now this one, which was even more convoluted and crazy and unexpected, and they're still here. So
But arguably the greatest health risk, I mean, you're talking about
Yes.
the nature of it is.
Right, and yes, we did lose some because of that. But the bottom line is, and like I said, and I will be talking about this to the school board tomorrow night. I really thought we had hit our record when last week on Thursday, Brian said that the teacher had been hired on Monday and called on Thursday to ask, how do I resign? What is the process? And Brian had a talk with her and tried to calm her down, but she was determined. So he explained, you should definitely offer your 2 weeks notice. You need to do that, and explained what she should do. And I said, wow, that's a record 4 days. Is that a record this year or? And then on Friday, that record was broken when a teacher taught for 2 hours and went immediately to the principal's office and gave her 2 weeks notice. Now granted, those are 2 brand new teachers, or obviously brand new. They don't have the stick-to-itiveness that your veterans do, because many of them have had the thought, I'm done, I can't do this anymore, I've got to go. And then they go right back to servicing their students and they stay. And they deserve to be treated with that respect. They deserve to be appreciated. And I don't think you differ with me on that at all. I believe that you believe that as well. And I believe it's perfectly legal to negotiate a longevity salary supplement, which will be reviewed every year, just like salary is, and just like all the other supplements. Sometimes the supplements get boosts, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they might have to go away, depending on funding. Yes, it is a recurring funding source here in Florida, but it is way below the national average. And what we have and what we've been working with, also FEA, through FEA, the governance board, working with, again, the Republican side of things, as well as the Democrats, who don't always, they're not always doing what we'd like, to change that. And the 2 that we met with, I believe at the DA, were horrified by the fact that we are at least 4,000 per pupil below the national average. And he said, imagine if we were just average. That would be up to, like 11,000, I believe he said, when it was the national average, and we were at 70 something. And just saying, imagine if we were just average. So that is a direction that we're hoping that we can push people into to understand that Florida does deserve better funding, so that we can come out from being so low, 47th in per pupil funding and 49th in teacher pay. It's a little embarrassing since we have the 3rd highest economy in the nation. So these are the kinds of things. I don't think there's anything illegal in it. I think some of them will get, there could be a challenge to it because it was negotiated this year, but it could have been negotiated this year to prevent compression. Could have nothing to do with this. they, because it would be, I just don't see how it can be, because it exists in other counties, and to be perfectly honest, if I'd understood that this was even something prior to my presidency, when I was second chair to Mike, I would have suggested this a long time ago to start helping with the compression and little, and just like some of the other counties. I'm, in that position, we're just not in conversations with these other people, and I'm just learning more about what other counties are doing to take care of their teachers. And again, I want Pinellas to be one of those counties. I just want Pinellas to have that rep. I want, that's my goal, is that Pinellas has the rep, that's where people want to work, that's where they want to be. That's my main goal. And I think this would help. And that's all I'm gonna say about that. I just and now I have to end everything with them. That's all I'm gonna say about that.
Well, thank you for that cue there. That's all I was thinking. So it does seem that we are still just quite far apart on just where to go and
I would have to
it's,
run the numbers, of course, to, see where they are.
so.
Yeah,
I'd
that's
actually,
accurate.
I'd actually like to take a few minutes and just talk with my team about next steps and so forth. So
Sure.
do we now have a few minutes? Because I seems like I know we always.
Absolutely. You want us to go?
Oh, no,
Yeah.
many more people.
Sure.
So
Thank you.
give us a few minutes.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And that one's already ready?
He said not to touch them. He happens to me. We have, I don't know if that is even working.
Oh my gosh.
You think it's funny, I wouldn't be able to find anything funny. When I'm giving a compliment about technology, I means it. I means it.
So we would like you to consider the language we proposed about this statute changing and agreeing to what we had proposed with the 11.6 and 3.25%. And then the box where it talks about the increase for the grandfathered, that figure can be adjusted within the scale from the 1495 so that it is lower for the less senior.
Very similar to what you did with the longevity bonus, just make the lower end lower and the higher end higher within that structure. And I'll work with the figures a little bit too, see like what's up. And so the people on the top end of the scale wouldn't get more than the performance highly effective, but they would get more than people on the bottom end of the scale on the grandfather scale. So I'd suggest you get Brian to play with those figures a little bit, see how that peppers through this. That's kind of sort of how you guys would have been doing the salary schedule for the last several years.
Lindsay did it, I can tell by the, yeah, you did it.
Lindsay's at
Oh, I'm
the
sorry.
house.
Yeah.
No, listen,
Friday, so-
Brian's done Brian has
Yeah,
helped
Brian
out
was
so
good.
much, absolutely, no, Brian did so much in preparation, it's not, but I mean, I do understand what's going on with the numbers. I think, again, if we were talking about, if the grandfather scale, if we knocked off the one and at the beginning of everyone, and we were talking about a brand new teacher, then that, I think that might be a valid suggestion, but there's no one on this scale that hasn't already served 12 years in the classroom. Like to sort of rob Peter to pay Paul.
Well,
when
but
you're-
that's
they're
what
all
you're doing
veterans.
with your longevity bonus, though, because you're suggesting that somebody at year 12 gets $250 longevity bonus, and somebody at year 36 gets $1250. So it's the same concept.
You're right, but they're all still getting the same increase from the, they're also getting the same increase that satisfies the statutory requirement. This is just a way to progressively honor the people at the very top of the scale. If what you're doing is to not, and forgive me if I don't mean to jump the gun if I misunderstand it, but I think what I'm hearing is that you're encouraging us to work within, just to sort of disregard the purple, work within that, the 1495, but just weighted a little heavier at the top of the scale, weighted lighter.
Yep.
Again, that's not adding to what we can do for, what it is taking away from people who are already, in some cases, a third, in some cases halfway through their careers. They're not new. They've earned that. So I mean, respectfully, we're not looking to take away from the and to sort of regressively move back from what's already on the table. We're looking to add to that, to progressively value our veterans more and more. And to make up for the deficiency in that the statutory requirement is created in terms of that.
Okay, so I think that's what you kind of restated. We have the 11.6 available, and we have the 3, which is an overall 3 1/4. So we were saying, you guys want to take it back and look at that again. That's where we are. We are not tonight, or we're not inclined to
We
do
don't have the
the,
capacity to go beyond.
to go beyond. So that's where we are.
So you don't even want to look at the numbers and see if play with them to make them.
No, I will do that within the $11.6 million. I suggest you guys do the same thing. But really, Lindsay, I appreciate your argument, but basically the same thing is happening with this proposal here. Somebody at year 12 is getting 1,889, somebody at year 31 is getting 2,889. Kind of the same as if somebody was getting, 700 and somebody getting 1,700.
I understand, and I understand what you're saying, but when you were to do that, if we were to take away the supplement and then we were to work with just the numbers now, that would create even more of a gulf between what some of our mid-career veterans were percentage-wise we're making compared to what we see on the highly effective and effective scales. So that's deepening that divide, or widening, the divide in terms of a percent of total increase. This is a way to cushion that a little bit and bring the divide a little bit closer together to narrow that gap. But if taking away any kind of
Of
additional
percentages, so let me.
percentages wise, yes, and that's where that equity is. So, because, I mean, again, you can, at giving somebody $1,000, well, that means something different to not certainly that it wouldn't be welcome to anyone. But it means something different depending on where you are in terms of your career and your future years of earning potential. So it absolutely makes
Okay.
sense that we put additional effort toward valuing those who have served the longest in the classroom and also have to make these years count even more because of the potential life changes and retirement and so forth that they're looking at within the next couple of years. But taking away from that base increase that's already been proposed doesn't do, it serves to do the opposite. That you would widen that equity gap for those on our scale. And again, none of them are brand new. They've all been here they've all been in service at least 12 years. And the difference between what they would be earning and what someone on the performance scale would be earning, including potentially somebody brand new in the door, not to say that we don't appreciate all of our brand new, we want everybody to come in.
Yeah.
But I think everybody would agree that our veterans should be valued as much as possible. And that's not just dollars. It is truly the way that compares that what those years of service are worth. And that's what this does.
Right, and then if you moved it to give the people over at the top away from the people in the middle have been traditionally kind of looked over a lot in the past. That group, that level, so that would not be something that would work out. That was always a problem because we were so worried, focused on having to give to the beginning teachers, which was something that the district was very interested in, is getting that number up, and that did help when we had the demand to bring it to 47.5. We were closer than a lot of other people, referendum or not. We were still closer because of the work we've done. And we always did, and I remember for years, we always tried to push more up at the top for the people who were about to go. And the middle group, many years went by that they were kind of always getting the short shrift. So anyone who's in that area knows that.
And you can see
So,
the way
and
that,
they would be the ones hit the worst if we tried to move it around like
if you
that.
can see the way that like on our proposal, that compression that has historically affected the middle, the middle to high end of the scale, that is actually more equalized here than it is on any of the other proposals, including your grandfather's proposal, which again maintains that linear decrease in value as we go up the scale. This actually serves to equalize for that compression. But certainly that, we feel like this is a fair counter proposal to last week's, introduction. But we welcome if you'd like to review it and look at and have other suggestions as to how we can add value and not just dilute it, but add value, but in a way that you think works for your own, that works with your own numbers. Understand that we look at those numbers differently. Certainly we welcome them.
So we have kind of given it back to you. We proposed, I know we provided you with ours, you provided us with yours. I think we have stated a lot, and I do know our time is expired already for tonight, but that the issue of the longevity supplement is the issue. We are not inclined to have a longevity
Well, I think
supplement.
we're gonna stick,
But we will-
both sides said that they were gonna do some more research
And
on
I
that
got all the
and
lists,
to
yep,
see what other people are
Okay.
doing.
All right.
Because if it's doable, we should do it.
absolutely. Okay, all right. What is your calendar? We only scheduled last week and tonight, so I know we want to keep meeting.
Anyway, and I know that there's a big problem in the classrooms, so this is going to be, don't throw anything at me. Because I might if you asked me this question and I was in this seat. Is there any way to get a release for our bargaining team for even a half a day so that we can start much earlier and put in like a decent amount of time?
And I was going to ask tonight if we're going to meet to maybe do we would come in at 5:30 because I know you're having to come in and we're kind of ready to go I'm here at 9:45 or 10:10, and we're not really starting until 5:40-ish tonight. But I do know you have to meet prior
Right,
to
'cause
that.
it's the only chance they get to talk to them.
Well, and, we've also, tried to meet beforehand. So, I am not sure about that, and I'd have to take that into account. If you could provide me a list of your members, I know who you guys are. If you could just give me a full, and the schools, I would appreciate it. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you for listening.
'Cause
I am
yeah,
not,
it's like
I'm
you
not
could
saying,
maybe-
I am absolutely not saying yes right now, but I will certainly look
Yeah,
at
because
it.
I think it just might ease some of this so we can get a little more.
You want us to put our schools on the side?
No, if Lindsay could just send it to me, that would be great. Yeah. I just want to make sure I have the
Yeah,
exact
because we
names
have,
and
so
so,
I'm looking right now.
but for right now, if we could just pick an evening and then we can revisit if needed.
Well, how about we all just blow off the school board meeting tomorrow night? What are you gonna say?
I would be glad to.
Come on, you wanna.
And I already have first year principals on Wednesday and I have another training on Thursday. Oh, yes, I wasn't going for Friday. I'm sorry. I didn't give that as an option. Sorry.
So you're looking at the week of November 1st?
Yeah, and you're.
Well, where are you going? We'll all just come with
He
you.
flew back today
My
for
daughter
his
moved to
other.
bought a house in Georgia, so I don't think that's really help us about moving to that. Oh, that's not going back up, finish doing that. I would rather be here, honestly.
Oh, but we can all come help.
Well,
North Georgia?
Yes, and Blair's go.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
We'll all go.
Release us, we can do some moving.
Seriously, then it's like, yeah, we move
Get us
stuff
done
around,
way
paint,
quicker,
whatever you need, and then
Kevin.
we sit down and we
She
chat for a while.
managed the Walmart steakhouse in Blair.
Even better.
Bring food home there right now.
See?
Thank you.
Now you're making it sound
My
even
husband
better.
will be up there toting boxes
I'm
and.
really good at meeting.
November 1st, is that what
What date is it on? Oh,
Field trip, November 1st.
So you said you're gone all
You could
next
call
week?
in.
Yeah, but I
He could call in
Okay.
the second, Tuesday, the second.
It is election day.
That's election day.
I mean, it's, I don't live in the area where the elections are happening.
Who lives in St. Louis?
Well, that Wednesday was there.
Wednesday the 3rd works for me.
Works for me.
What day?
Wednesday, the third.
Wednesday, the 3rd is,
No.
yep.
What time?
So just the third, we do the first as well?
Yes, do you want to meet Monday or even Tuesday, if it's okay with them. Give them-
I'm trying to get this to November.
Did we hear that Monday was?
Monday?
I think, yeah, you can say
Okay, yeah, I'm
Wednesday.
good.
No, Wednesday, the third.
Is that what works?
That works for us.
Are we here or there?
Or
Georgia,
in Georgia.
come to Georgia.
Georgia.
Georgia,
Doesn't matter.
Georgia.
Back over there.
5,
Yep, that's fine. Over there, it's
5, unless you can see if you can get, I don't know if that'll happen that soon, but let's see if we can try to work out something where we get at least,
I will,
that would be
yeah.
so cool.
But for right now, is it 5 or 5:30 start?
5.
Start at
Well,
5?
Jay would start.
Well, they're asking for a start because we have to confer.
Right, so we have to have a caucus because I don't get to see them, so I guess 5:30.
I can just do a half hour more work, so before I come over, so. that would be good.
Is there
Can we go to 7:30 then?
Yeah,
5:30 to
is there any
7:30?
issue of going later?
Well,
More incentive to get us released.
5:30.
Well, and again, I would do that handily, but I'm not gonna,
We're meeting at 5.
Bargaining is not part-time.
and again, it's the numbers of too, so Nancy and Lindsay, that might be something to think about. It's the number of people
Yeah.
needing coverage. So,
Well, and speaking of numbers, I think that that's one place in this proposal that I really would like for y'all to consider. I think there are different ways of looking at all of that. We just have to.
I'm talking about numbers of people who need release from their
I know.
schools.
I know, I was using it as a segue.
Do we have a meeting date?
All right, November 3rd, and
Okay.
we'll send out an invite. All right,
Thank y'all.
yep, thank you.
Thank you for looking at the raise, that, even the possibility of it is for.